Welcome to Downtown Orlando UX. This is halfway through the year, so we are really excited to have you all join us. Our mission, and I added since October 21st, 2014. We seem to always talk about how long this meetup has been going on, so I wanted to be sure to include that now and let everybody know, yeah, we've been doing this for a while, connecting people in the UX community with people outside of our space. Everyone is welcome. We do want to create opportunities for anyone to learn and share knowledge about the field of user experience. So this is not exclusive to people in the UX field, but anyone. From all of us, we're halfway through the year now, and thank you for being here with us. We hope that you have successfully made it through the year and not had too many issues with recovering from this thing that we all call COVID, and we're grateful to have you all here. I do want to introduce who our co-organizers are. They'll be out in the chat too, so if you want to chime in on the chat or you have anything that you want to add to the conversation, you can speak up there, and we'll also have an opportunity for you all to talk. But we've got Abhishek, Leah, myself, Jason, and Matt. Feel free to take a screenshot of this. I know we all welcome connecting if there's ever a topic that you'd like to share with us, or if there's anything that you would like for us to discuss, we could maybe meet up one-on-one as well. So I recommend connecting with everybody on the team. A little bit of housekeeping before we get rolling. If you have your camera, we'd love to see you. At some point, we may be taking some screenshots, trying to capture this wonderful group that is called Do UX. And if you have any questions, raise your hand or in the chat, maybe chime in and let us know what you're thinking. And we're going to be covering human-centric product engineering, why designers and developers should team up. This is a topic that I know everyone gets to experience on a daily basis, and I hope that we shed some light on some challenges that others might have that might be surprising, and also maybe some ways to approach things in a different way. I am Wes Brown. I'm the UX manager with Advent Health. Again, I'd love to have you all connect with me, and if there's anything you'd like to have a breakout on, I welcome conversations. So I'd love to chat. I'll be moderating the conversation, but really we've got our panelists and rock stars that are in their field. And I'm going to let them each have a couple of minutes to talk about their background so you get to know them. And then we'll start off with Jeremy discussing a little bit, and then we'll circle back with the panel to be able to talk about what Jeremy shares with us. So Nadine, I'll welcome you discussing a little bit about you.
Let me get off mute. Hello, everyone. My name is Nadine, and this is my first time joining the Downtown Orlando UX. I'm happy to be here, and it's nice to see everybody on the call. I am currently a product owner, and I work closely with actually Leah and Wes at Advent Health. Leah, I'm lucky to have Leah as one of my UX UI designers on my cross-functional team. And we primarily oversee the provider scheduling and directory features across our enterprise at Advent Health. And I've been doing this for about 3 years now. I kind of shared with the others earlier on that data analytics background, started out as a business intelligence developer with Advent Health. And then I found like I was missing something. I needed that more human interaction, working with stakeholders. And I was presented this growth opportunity, and it was obvious that I had to jump on it. So I am now acting as a product owner, and it's been a fun journey just to kind of dive into something new, working with a cross-functional team. We are working in Agile. And so it's been a great growth path, and I'm really excited about what else is coming my way in this career journey. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome, thank you, Nadine. Mm-hmm. Justin.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Justin Kulifer, co-founder of APG Emerging Tech. That is a consulting firm based in the Atlanta area, and we help other corporations really take any idea that they have and vet it and shepherd it through the product process to bring it to life. From a career perspective, my career began more in the business analysis space. Then I transitioned into UX and ultimately into delivery leadership, more into the project and program management space. My fellow panelists tonight, Jeremy Duval and I met years ago at Slalom Consulting, where he was a leader over development organization, and I was one of the leaders over first the UX practice and then later our delivery leadership practice. Career highlights, definitely. I've worked in public and private sector. One of the best projects I worked on was a collaboration with the Department of State and Department of Homeland Security to develop ways to catch bad guys at our borders many years ago. So, definitely have had a fun career journey, and I love bringing that sort of experience to the table to help my clients today.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. And Mike.
All right. Thank you, Wes. So for me, most of my background is as an engineer. I probably spent 15 plus years as an engineer and transitioned what sounds fairly similar to Nadine. I had an opportunity to become a product owner. So it was a role that I felt like I was already doing. And so it was like, well, I can focus on one job instead of three. So let me try just doing this one thing. So jumped all over it, did that for probably about a year. And then ultimately led a group of, I would say 10 or 12 product owners across California, Florida, Boston, and Portugal. And learned a ton from doing that. And then in the last, I guess, year and a half, I moved on from that. And now I'm running our engineering group at Overops. And I just recently hired a UX designer, our first one here, who's actually on the call, Kelly, where is she? Is she on?
I'm here.
There she is, Kelly Parker. Sweet. So very, very excited to begin that collaborative process. I've worked a lot with designers over many years and really learned, how to work effectively with them, integrated on our teams rather than, having very distinct boundaries. So that's it for me.
All right. Thanks, Mike. And Jeremy.
Hi there, everybody. I am the nerd in the room. My name's Jeremy. I started 7Factor Software. We are a software engineering as a services business. That means we're consultants, but we're slightly different than your traditional consulting firm in that we are all developers. Every person on my team, every one of my 36 folks, except for Alyssa, who is my amazing director of marketing and operations. Say hi, Alyssa.
Hello, happy to be here.
And also my sidekick on a podcast that we run occasionally. We've only done one episode, so I shouldn't plug that at all, right? But I am a developer. I've been an engineer for 16 plus years. I started working on this product called the Sidekick. If you're anything north of a millennial, you probably don't know what that is, but it was a really fun platform that I got to cut my teeth as a software engineer on. Moved on to Microsoft, eventually went to Slalom after they laid us off. We worked on this really terrible product called the Kin, which probably could have used every UX designer on this phone call's help. It was absolute steaming garbage. Look it up if you don't believe me. We sold a total of 6,000 units and we gave everyone their money back after we realized that the product wouldn't sell. So that's my legacy at Microsoft, quite a funny one. At Slalom, I learned that I actually do like talking to humans. Some people think of developers as people that just sort of sit with their headphones on and their, dark cubes, listening to techno music or heavy metal and writing all these pretty colored words that turn into software. But that's actually not the art of software engineering. Software engineering is in fact an art. It is much less a science, and it requires a lot of collaboration and conversations. And when I arrived into consulting, I realized that it was exactly the thing that I wanted, which is I get to not only have conversations with people about the types of things they want to develop, but I also get to work tightly with cross-functional teams and experts that are excellent at what they do. And we all get to come together and help drive the solution that hopefully solves the stakeholders' central problems. So I am an engineer turned into someone who likes to talk with folks, and hopefully I will entertain you just a little bit. I do have some stupid memes in my PowerPoint decks, but feel free to pipe in at any time, and I'm happy to make this more of a collaborative discussion as opposed to a monologue.
All right, let's see if we can get you presenter rights, I think.
All right, I think if you just stop sharing, it should work just fine. I tried earlier.
Sounds good. Awesome.
All right. Can you guys see?
Yes.
Excellent. And that's what I worked on, just in case anybody was wondering.
Yeah.
All right. Can folks see my screen?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. So this is a stock PowerPoint template because I am extraordinarily untalented when it comes to design and art. But here's what we're going to talk about. Human-centric product engineering. I know this isn't something that's probably new to everyone. These words that I sort of put together into this title really describe exactly everything that we want to get across here. And so what we're going to talk about is we're going to start with just a very brief abstract, right? Context. What are we talking about? Question one, context, what we're talking about. Then we're going to move into 3 questions. These 3 questions are specifically applicable to the product engineering lifecycle. Number 1, are we building the right thing? DevOps really helped us figure this out. DevOps being the application of Agile to your operations pipeline. There's a lot of other stuff with DevOps, and people have made it about tools and things. But if you read the Phoenix Project or you talk to John Willis or any of the guys that invented it, they're talking about a culture shift inside operations. Question 2, is this feasible? Is the thing that we're trying to do feasible? Question 3, do we have the correct batch size? I'm using Kanban methodology or Kanban terminology, excuse me there, because I'm a fan of Kanban, and we can talk more about that as we move through the presentation. Then I'm going to give you guys just a few examples. First, we're going to look at some negative examples, and then we're going to look at some positive examples of what happens when we don't answer these questions correctly. 2 of them are slightly humorous, and one of them is a really good example, in my opinion, of how we partnered with someone on the phone who is part of our panel to create a product that went to market in 8 weeks that solved a pretty interesting problem during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then finally, I will shut up and we can talk about more interesting things and get the opinions of our wonderful panelists. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward. So what are we doing? What is the point of building a good digital project, or how do we build a good digital product? Excuse me. So first, collaboration should be the very first thing that comes to your mind. A lot of dysfunctional teams will sit inside silos where the engineering crew receives orders from project management, and the UX team will do their work in a vacuum, and they will produce these wonderful Figmas or InVision prototypes or whatever, and they will hand those to the engineering team, and they will say, it's done, go build the thing, it's good. This is a very common way of building things. If you look at something like structural engineering or building a house, this is exactly what happens. The structural engineers of, my wife is one, marry someone smarter than yourself, key to life. They will develop and build a plan for how a building can stand. And they do that in a vacuum. Why? Because everything that they're doing obeys the laws of physics, right? 9.8 meters per second straight down never changes, right? Wind loads never change. Snow loads never change. It's all based on things that are observable in the world around us in science, right? So is software scientific? Absolutely not. People change their mind every 30 seconds. You can have a problem that you're trying to solve, and you can ask one stakeholder, how would you solve this problem? And they'll tell you, and then you ask the next stakeholder, how would you solve this problem? And they tell you something completely different. So then our jobs as software engineers and as UXers becomes, how do I synthesize what 2 crazy people are saying and create one simple story that makes sense and makes both of them happy? And the unfortunate fact is this is one of the most impossible things that you can do, is to get a bunch of humans to come to a consensus and an agreement on something so that we all meet and solve some problem in a way, right? You need high functioning engineering teams and high functioning UX teams to develop a good product. And the most important thing, as I just illustrated with my silly examples, is they have to talk to one another. If we aren't having the conversation on some form of cadence, then we are going to run into problems. We're going to encounter scenarios where UX completes a prototype and hands it off to the engineering crew, and the engineering crew is going to go, that ain't going to happen. I'm sorry. We don't have time. We don't have buy-in. We don't have budget. And what you want is a custom date picker that's going to take us 4 weeks to build, right? We want to avoid those things because, again, the binding together of UX and engineering, the point of us teaming up is to make the stakeholders' hopes and dreams come true, or to meet the business requirements that have been handed to us from our stakeholders. So it's extraordinarily important for us to have lockstep communication as we go through. We can talk about different ways of doing this in the panel if you'd like, where, you know, a lot of the times I've seen where UX is like a sprint ahead and we're doing design sprints and things. And this all works. If you fold it in appropriately and you talk to one another, it can actually work. And before you begin, and then again, with each cycle of the development process, we have to work together, in my opinion, to answer 3 questions. There are a bunch of other questions, obviously, that we have to answer, but these 3 to me are some of the more important ones if you want your specific iteration to be successful. I like to couch these in the context of a modern software development lifecycle. Why? Because I am a software developer. And to be honest with you guys, as you've seen, the church of Agile has sort of, kind of spread out into other areas where we're using Agile to manage our UX teams, and we're using Scrum, the almighty Scrum, to handle all kinds of other problems and processes in our worlds. And that's great because, even in the paper where Waterfall was created, the guy at the end says, I don't think this will work, which is hilarious to me. So Scrum is a fantastic way to work. So why don't we think about fast feedback loops, and why don't we think about why Waterfall doesn't work and apply that to the same relationship that we have from our user experience team and our engineering team? Why would it work for UX to hand something over the wall that they have created in a vacuum? Why would we expect that to work when we don't expect that to work when we are executing on requirements with our stakeholders? UX would never dream of saying, yeah, stakeholders, go in that room over there and draw me a picture. And when you bring it back, that's what you want. I'll go design it for you. And I'll give you your nice envision prototypes, right? That's insane. We wouldn't do that. So to me, the modern software development lifecycle is about fast feedback loops. How quickly can we make modifications to our software and get that in front of folks to then bless and or provide feedback on, so we can get to market, which is the ultimate goal of everyone everywhere. So again, from my perspective, applying these concepts, applying fast feedback loops and collaboration in your conversations between your engineering crews, your stakeholders, and your UX crews will produce a much better deliverable than folks working in their own silos. This also talks about the commoditization of development, where people think it's a job that can be done in a dark room, and I'm very anti that, so we can talk about that as well. So everybody needs to come to the table when we're talking about the design of a product. All right, question number 1. Are we building the right thing, right? My silly little picture, quiet nail, hammer, no, and it's a screw, right? We're not building the right thing, obviously. This is the kind of the point of Agile is are we building the right thing, right? That feedback loop that we put in place, which we started when we invented Scrum, we started with 2 weeks, and sometimes people would do 3-week sprints and maybe 5-week sprints and all this other crazy stuff, right? But the more longer your sprints, the more you're kind of getting towards Waterfall, which makes no sense. Anyway, are we building the right thing? That question is answered through Agile and through the collaboration that Agile created in the software development lifecycle. The strength of Agile is people, not process. The strength of Agile is not story points. The strength of Agile is not 2-week sprints. The strength of Agile is not release roadmaps. The strength of Agile is people, not process. And the focus on folks having a conversation and building this conversation about what we're creating for our stakeholders internally inside the teams, right? The other big question here is the 80-20 rule, right? When a stakeholder comes to me, and this happens often, they say, I want an iPhone app with a blue blinky light and the following 4 other things, and I wanted to, control my drone remotely. The 80-20 rule states that there's probably, you don't want most of what you're telling me, right? And we've discovered this through time. We've discovered this through many iterations, and most of you who have worked in teams have discovered this. You built a feature, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, that was a waste of time. We shouldn't have done that because nobody uses it. Well, at least if you're cognizant of your own products, maybe you're that way. It's very important to understand that you have to hone in through those fast feedback loops on what you're building, and you only want to create the best thing possible for your stakeholders, again, using common theme here, fast feedback loops, right? In my opinion, UX should take the lead here. Engineering, as a developer, when a UXer comes to me with a screen or with an interaction design or with a vision for a product, the first thing I'm going to say is, all right, I will trust, but I'm going to verify. I'm going to go back through what you sent me, and I'm going to make sure it makes sense. Because again, I am a thinking, breathing human being. I can understand business problems. I'm the guy writing the code that's going to solve this business problem, by the way. So it's important for me to have an understanding of why we're doing this and what we're doing and what we're putting in front of our customer, right? So again, it's a partnership, but in my opinion, UX should lead this, right? Because you all are the folks that are the most qualified to say, this is the right thing, right? Stakeholder, this is the right thing. I've done all of my workshops. I've done my interaction design. We've done 15 ways of clickable prototypes, and you finally figured out what you want. This is what I think we need to build, right? And then you bring that back to the engineering crew, and we have a conversation. We trust but verify, and then we go off and build the fantastic thing that you wanted us to build, and everybody is happy. Number 2, the second question is, can this be done? Growing up, I was a huge Far Side fan. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but this was my favorite Far Side comic of the kid pushing on the pull door. And I feel like I've done this many times in my career because I just didn't think hard enough, where I am bashing my head against an intractable problem that is just not possible for me to solve simply, either with my experience, or it's just simply not possible because computers are bad at factoring. Like, there are plenty of reasons why you can't solve a problem. I learned that in all my theory courses in my master's degree and my undergrad. So there are a couple other items though. Can we build this in the time with the given team? It's not just about tractability, P equals NP. This is also about, can we build this with the team that I have? If I have a crew of junior developers and you're asking me to develop this massive, crazy backend feature that requires me to implement dynamic programming and bin packing, we're probably not going to get there, right? And that's not attacking my team. That's just simply saying and stating the fact that I don't have the crew with the expertise to solve your problem. So we either have to change the problem, or we have to go and find a different team, which hopefully, that's possible. Find some more senior folks to help those juniors, right? Second is, can we build this without bankrupting our stakeholders or undercutting their mission? And this is important because if you come to me with a feature and it's going to take the entire budget to create this feature, I'm going to push back on you, and I'm going to say, is this really what the stakeholder wants? Do they know that this one individual set of items that you want me to develop for you on the front end and the back end is going to take probably 6 sprints worth of time, which, it never happens. The stuff we build isn't that complex. Rarely. Sometimes I've seen it, but for the most part, it's sort of an egregious example. But the point is that we still have to make sure that what we're developing isn't bankrupting our stakeholders, undercutting their mission, or in any shape, form, or fashion, putting the engineering team in a position to where we cannot deliver against that. In my opinion, engineering is the folks that will say this. Because I love my UXers, and you guys are amazing, and I'll work with you all day long. But when it comes to API design and execution implementation of algorithms, pagination, database design, performance issues, all of that, those are things that we should definitely be square in the seat of saying, this isn't possible and this is possible, right? But it's not about taking a hard line on that, right? We never want to do that. That's a terrible decision. Instead, it's a conversation. It's, okay, I get what you want, but here's why it's hard. And here's why we might need to change our design. Or, hey, can you guys help me out and go and talk to the stakeholder, or bring me with you to the stakeholder, even better, and let's have a conversation with them why we don't think this is possible. And here are 5 other really cool ideas that we came up with that will be slightly different, but still solve the problem, and it meets our deadlines and it meets our budget, right? It's again about a healthy tension, but it's about holding each other accountable, but it's also about working together to solve the problems for our stakeholders. Or you can convince me that this is just how it is and I have no choice, at which point we have to go back to the stakeholder and say, all right, this is going to take 4 weeks longer than you think it is. So go ahead and build your budget out. Let's make sure, you know, that everybody understands that my Scrum team is going to be tied up for an extra 4 weeks to get your thing out the door the way you want it. Finally, do we have the right batch size? Again, I'm a fan of Kanban. Kanban is one of my favorite ways. You see in the background over here, I don't know if you can see it now, but I have a Kanban board that I do all of my house projects with. I drive my wife crazy with this. But to me, Kanban is a fantastic way to describe systems. It's not just about, you know, software engineering or Toyota production management and creating cars. It's also a fantastic way to describe solving really any system and putting a workflow over the top of it, right? They use it in hospitals and stuff. So batch size, for those of you who are unaware, is basically what's the size of the thing I'm putting through my machine. If you think of UX, engineering, DevOps, which I think DevOps lives in the engineering team, but some people segregate it. If you think of all of those as a pipeline, and we're dropping a unit of work into the UX team, and then it's moving to the engineering team, and then it's getting deployed to production, the batch size is the size of that rock that we're putting that then gets shepherded all the way through that pipeline. So the batch size has to be the right size. Otherwise, we're doing too much and we may waste work. We may build things that the user didn't want. We may build things that the user thought they needed, but then when we get to the next iteration, we recognize that the problem is solved through a very trivial implementation over here by the BI team. Who knows? But there are plenty of reasons why we have to make sure that that batch size is correct. And in my opinion, it should be as small as possible. Not like Pico batch sizes where, you know, we're changing the colors of, you know, the buttons or anything like that. But from an interaction perspective, and when you're building out your feature, making sure that it is consumable by an engineering team in 1 week's time or less. That's how I think of it. And again, this is a negotiation, and your mileage will vary based on your teams, based on how your enterprise is set up, based on, you know, the leadership that you have in your company and how bought in they are into Agile or something like Kanban. So it's important to understand that this will change, but from my perspective, smaller batch sizes are better. And that's also indicated by all the literature in Kanban. That's indicated by Toyota Production Management, the Phoenix Project, if you've read it, fantastic book. It all talks about keeping your batch sizes small such that we make sure, again, we're building the right thing, which goes back to question number 1. These things are kind of circular, if you haven't noticed yet. They all sort of talk to one another. So those are my 3 questions. Briefly, if you're building an MVP, you'll have user requirements that must be met to adequately test the viability of the product. Engineers have priorities under the hood. We want to build the architecture that's robust, efficient, extensible, scalable, to function well enough now and as development continues. Again, collaboration. We want the product to not break now, right? We also want it to keep not breaking when it grows. And finally, we're going to trust UX that when you tell us that this custom date picker that we have to build is really critical, we're going to create that thing. The collaboration is key. We want to make sure that everybody's talking to one another and that we're going to market together to serve our stakeholders. All right, finally, let's get to the summary and we'll go through the examples real quick. 3 questions. Are we building the right thing? Is the thing feasible? Is our batch size small enough? If UX designers and engineers work together and we agree on the answers to these questions, we will be able to reach a consensus and solve the problem that the stakeholders have put in front of us, hopefully in an iterative fashion where we're moving forward in little increments and we're producing something that gets feedback. And then finally, you know, there is that business partner factor that we all have to worry about, where We get something in front of someone and they completely change their mind and they're like, oh, great, now we have to completely start over. None of this makes any sense anymore. We can talk about that another day. That's a whole Agile sort of put some guardrails in place for this, but that's also a lot of expectation management, which is just humans, right? You put a bunch of humans in a place and you put some in charge of others, and there's this dynamic about expectations, and it becomes kind of a fun system to try and solve. But so let's jump in real quick. Let's talk about, I'll try and keep this fast so we can get to the panel. What are some negative examples of when something went wrong? So the first example I have is there's a home healthcare organization that we worked with that built a mobile platform with spending literally zero time with their users. They rushed to get it out the door and they shoved it down the throat of their users and they said, hey guys, this is the best thing you have ever seen. You need to use this. Guess what happened? The user said, no. Half of them threw the app out, never used it. And the other 50% spent their entire time just being frustrated and consistently filing hundreds of support tickets. So that sucks, right? That's not good for anybody. Adoption is terrible. As a business owner, think about that. You just spent like what, 1-point-something million having an app created that nobody uses. That's a huge win, right? To the management up the chain. So we want to avoid that, right? So what is the lesson that we learned from this? Ask your users what they want. Make sure that UX and engineering both hear their answers, and make sure that both teams are a part of a fast feedback loop at every stage of development. I don't think that just putting a crack UX team in this scenario would have solved the problem, because the complexity of the issues that are related to how this enterprise worked required some systems engineering, some systems architecture, and an understanding of how mobile applications work. And that's not to say that a really good UX team won't know how mobile apps work, especially if you're an ex-developer and you've moved into UX. You probably have an understanding of React Native or iOS or something of that nature, so you can provide some color on that. But there's plenty of issues that are underneath the hood of this software that we uncovered after we looked into it that were preventing users from adopting it. And a lot of it was related to performance, just a poorly built schema, a poorly implemented data model, a poorly implemented performance plan on top of, just to be completely honest, hot garbage servers resulted in this thing failing. So it wasn't just about the poor interaction design and the fact that the system didn't meet their needs. It was also that the engineering team didn't meet their needs either, because all of the non-functional requirements, what we call non-functionals, which is performance, site reliability engineering, high availability performance, all of those things were just kind of ignored because we wanted to get something out the door and put it in front of our users. So this is probably the most egregious example I have of a very poorly built product that failed abysmally. It was a really big deal. Lots of money was wasted, and it could have been solved if we had had, again, a tight collaboration between the field and UX and a tight engineering crew. The next example I have, and this is a funny one. So we were talking to a local Atlanta moving company, and like random entrepreneurs get crazy ideas, especially if you have no idea what technology is and how to use it. So I love my non-technical founders. They are amazing humans, and I will die for them if I have to. But this particular one was a little extra crazy because they wanted to build a system that was an artificial or augmented reality driven quoting system that used object recognition, which is a very complex field, to figure out what was in your house and to quote on how much it would cost for you to move. So the idea is I pick up my phone and I hit the button and I take a video of my room and I spin around, and this software figures out what's in your room. That's kind of crazy, right? We can do that, right? MIT has some really nice algorithms on it, and it's an AI thing. It's been around for a bit. It's also really, really expensive, and it's also really hard to train correctly. So cool, yeah, really cool. But it would cost probably $1 million and a team of like 12 to build this for them. And the issue here is that they didn't consult UX at all. They just said, this is what we want. can you go build it for me? Software engineers, you guys are smart. Will you go build this for me? And we're like, no, unless you have a lot of money. If you have a lot of money, I have this UX team over here that you can bring in that will help you figure out that you actually don't want this. Again, it's someone thinking that is the coolest thing ever and I want to build that, but not having an understanding of what it means. So there are plenty of alternatives. And I bet most of you with the UX brain are thinking, wow, there's like 100 things we could do that might not be AR, that would just be kind of cool and might also get you there, right? And we pitched a couple of ideas, but again, us not being truly a UX firm, they just weren't going to hear it. And plus they didn't want to talk to our UX partners. So we ended up saying, yeah, well, all right, fine. We'll see you guys later. But the lesson learned from this, most importantly, is that UX and development should be involved in tandem to provide actual technical feasible solutions and steer our stakeholders to a more realistic set of expectations. I guarantee you, if I had had a sharp UX team in there helping them figure their stuff out, they wouldn't have come to me with a crazy idea that I had to say, well, okay, you got $6 million? Sure, we can do that. So that was a fun one. And I still to this day use this as my funniest example of a project that someone had no idea what they wanted and came to me. And yeah, it was definitely obviously over their budget. All right, so finally, and this one will look familiar to Justin. A multi-family residential security system manufacturer, they wanted to upgrade their technology platform to something modern. So we actually had Justin, my good friend, do the UX for this. It was great. The UX was perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with it. And when we got the deliverables from Justin and his crew, we're like, this doesn't look big. This is probably fine. You know, we can get this done in 6 months. It's 2 years in and we're still building it. So it was massive. And that is totally on the engineering team. We made a huge mistake not walking in the door with Justin and his team and walking alongside him as he produced these wonderful Figma prototypes or Axure prototypes that he did for us. And that, again, we failed to understand the magnitude of what we needed to build there. So this was a violation of the batch size rule, right? And that UX does their thing. And they're like, this isn't a big deal. Like my batch size it was reasonably large, but I'll let Justin speak if he wants to about this. But my opinion, it wasn't unreasonably large, but it was pretty good size. It was decent, like a decent sized rock. If we had been walking alongside of him, we would have recognized almost immediately that this is freaking huge. It's not huge for you, but it's huge for us because there's all this other stuff in the back end that we have to go sort out, and we have to kind of unplug these wires and, you know, rebuild this section of the API and, you know, completely redo their Amazon architecture over here. And we want to put them in a load balancer and all these other things that we kind of brought in. So that was a fun lesson learned for me. And to this day, I will not do a UX project without having one of my software engineers or my engineering managers involved in the conversation during the UX iterations, because it helps us understand more about what we're trying to build, and we avoid this kind of horrible batch size problem. All right, yeah. Finally.
Hey, Jeremy, I'm going to add on that one. I think one of the things that so many of us find, right, whether you are in consulting and dealing with external clients, or if you're on an internal team, UXers are often brought in this discovery phase. So we believe that the idea is baked enough for us to get involved, or others in our sphere think it's baked enough for us to get involved. What I know we're finding, certainly on my teams, and I know Jeremy would agree, is an upfront assessment goes a long way to really get in and lift the hood and say, all right, what sort of engine is actually powering this vehicle that we're about to work on and redesign? And you know, in consulting world, clients don't like to pay for assessments. They say, oh, we've got this, we know exactly what we need. And I think it's on us, all of us, who, no matter who our stakeholders are, to convince them that an honest assessment is important. Not all of us have the tenure that you may have, stakeholder, with this product. Allow us to come in and learn about the current state of things. And that helps direct the next steps, right, for discovery. How involved do the engineers need to be? A lot or a little? Okay, great. Now we know based on our assessment how to plan for that and do the resource allocation accordingly. That's all I was going to add there.
No, that's a great point. And I think a follow-on to that we can get into in the panel if we have questions related to it is a lot of the times that initial assessment, both in the context of being a consultant and in the context of you working for an enterprise, when someone comes to you with a crazy idea, you shouldn't always say yes. And that's something I learned going back to the augmented reality idea. I mean, the discovery, if I spent 30 minutes with these people asking them a bunch of hard questions, I probably would have saved myself like a week's worth of work coming up with alternatives to try and pitch them on the right way to solve this. So not only does it help you understand the magnitude of how involved these teams need to be during the execution of the project, but it also helps you understand the feasibility of the business problem. I've had a bunch of startup owners come to me with random nonsensical ideas. Again, I love all of my people, but sometimes the idea just isn't right. It's not there. It makes no sense. And you have to be able to push back on that appropriately and kindly to make sure that folks are listening and you avoid, again, building something that nobody's ever going to want or wasting their money or their budget. Good comment. So finally, when things go right. So a local healthcare company asked us to build a COVID-19 screening application. I know there's 15 million of these things out there. But this was like in March of 2020, like right when the pandemic hit. We spun up a small team. We partnered with that same small group of amazing UX folks that I mentioned earlier. We designed features as we needed them. We kept the feature sets tiny and light, which, by the way, affects what you sell as well if you're building a SaaS product. And we kept the fast feedback loops tight in between UX and engineering. Literally, our engineering crew, the engineering manager on the project and Justin were like basically joined at the hip for the entire project to make sure that we were developing and building the right thing per Justin's vision. And we released a SaaS product in 8 weeks, and it serves over 30,000 caregivers, several smaller independent organizations for all of the screening and vaccination needs. This was a huge win because, again, we answered all those questions correctly. We were tight with one another. We went together with the problem. It's not like, Justin came up with the problem and also came up with the solution. We all sat in a room as a team and started talking about how do we want to solve this problem. And Justin's like, I have some cool ideas. I'm going to go build a prototype. I'll come back to you guys in a couple of days. We came back in the same room a couple of days later. We're like, oh yeah, this is cool. What do we think about this? And then I had the stupid idea of why don't we do 2 apps? And they're like, yeah, okay, sure, fine. He's the CEO, follow what he says, which you shouldn't have done. And then, 3 weeks later, we decided to put it in 1 app. So it's like, it's fun. Like we had these tight, fast feedback loops that we were able to execute on. And we got a product to market that actually serves 30,000 caregivers right now that are pediatric nurses across the United States. So that was a really cool project and a really cool example of how things can go right when you focus, again, on collaboration, problem solving, and answering those questions the correct way. So finally, that's a wrap. I don't have anything else to talk about. Hopefully that was painless and quick. I will shut up now and hand the mic back to Wes. You can start the panel, yeah?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeremy. That was amazing. So yes, you are a successful speaker.
Well,
You've validated that.
You flatter me. I know that's not true, but you flatter me.
Well, thank you for that. And yeah, I'm going to kick things off. It was in some of the things that you said. You talked about having a UX and dev relationship. That strong relationship building can make a difference, but sometimes we don't have that yet. I'm going to start with Mike and ask, if an organization doesn't support or see the value in UX working directly together, or even have UX yet, how do you get them to support that or understand it? Since you just brought on a UX person for your team.
What we really had to do was make the case for the pain of not having it, right? We were stuck in a kind of an endless loop of rework, right? Not having design. We all became designers by committee, and none of us liked what each other did. So we'd look at it and then we just go, like, where did this come from? Who did this work? It's not cohesive. It's my design versus somebody else's design. The entire product suffered. So yeah, I had to make the case that, we were actually less productive by not having the design being able to be done up front. And so that's ultimately why we were able to bring in our first designer.
Awesome, thanks. And Justin, being a consultant, kind of tying into that, sometimes companies might be like, oh, you even mentioned, yeah, we don't maybe need to bring those guys in yet, or we don't want to pay for that. How have you seen success with getting the organization to bring both people to the table at the same time?
Organizational leaders love to avoid things that are risky. They don't like risk at all. Things that could endanger their financial statements, things that could endanger timelines or customer satisfaction. And I think when we can come to the table and explain, here are things that we can do to mitigate the risk of those things happening, their ears perk up. Great example, a tactic that we apply to, I would say 95% of our projects is rapid prototyping. And that's where, as we're eliciting requirements and understanding what our stakeholders want, we're visualizing it in Axure. That's our go-to tool while they're talking live. And so they can begin to see this thing come to life. And when we explain, this is an insurance policy, we are showing this to the room of stakeholders to give a bunch of head nods or head shakes, right? Where someone says, no, you missed the mark. It needs to be Y instead of X. I would much rather capture that using a tactic like rapid prototyping, because that mitigates the risk of Jeremy and team or any software development team going down the wrong path, having more questions than answers, and things that could protract the overall timeline and cost more money. So when you bring it back to time and money, most people will pay attention.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, Matt just chimed in, show, don't just tell, right? And
Yes.
that can make a big difference. Thanks. I'm going to ask Nadine the next question. So Jeremy, I wanted to see if you had anything you wanted to add to this specific one before we move on to the next one.
Super quick. Yeah. As a developer, as an engineering leader, when people come to me and say, I want you to build a thing, and they don't give me any sort of UX resources or humans, I'm like, okay, so you're going to double the time for me to build this? Oh, okay, sure. I'll take double your money. That's fine with me. I call it the UX stupid tax, right? If you have to talk people into doing the right thing. And since I've become a consultant, I kind of lose my filter, and because you're paying me to not have a filter. So I tell folks, look, yes, we can do that. You're going to get these garbage looking weirdo things with some base tables that we pulled out of a React library, and it's going to work, and it will do the thing that you want it to do, but it might not be efficient, or it might not be pretty, or it might not solve the problem. Again, we're good problem solvers. Developers, again, don't think of us as commoditized fulfillment operators where we just walk up and pull a lever every day. We know how to think, and we can create things, and a good UI engineer can build something that's passable. But the problem is that it's not optimal. And oftentimes stakeholders lose sight of optimal because they think that it's going to save them money. But the fact of the matter is you're wasting so much more money and time having us do the job that a specialist should do. It's kind of like going to your general practitioner physician to get a liver transplant. It's just, yeah, he could probably do it, but not a good idea.
Awesome, thanks for adding that. Nadine, I'm going to ask you the next question, and it kind of ties in a little bit with Jeremy's presentation. Maybe you have an example of where you've seen the products that you've worked on benefit from the strong relationship between UX and development. And for the panel after Nadine talks, maybe if you have examples too, or even something that has suffered because you didn't have that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was really excited to talk about this tonight because we've been presented with a once in a lifetime opportunity, I think. So as you know, I work for Advent Health. It's not very often that a healthcare organization shifts an EMR system across the entire enterprise and entire organization. So we are actually adopting and switching out our legacy EMR systems, which you guys might be familiar with, Athena and Cerner, and now taking on a completely new system called Epic. And with that comes some constraints and challenges from a technical front, and we are actively trying to integrate that new system into our current experiences that we provide to our consumers through our portal. So Leah, I shared this earlier, actually on my Scrum team, and she is my UX UI designer. We collaborate very closely. In addition to that, we have a cross-functional team of developers. And what this system framework looks like is, okay, so we're being presented a challenge. We need to integrate with a new system. We need to continue keeping current experiences that consumers are used to having with our brand, Advent Health. And we need to introduce new features and capabilities within our portal. So if you can imagine the challenges that come with that, we need to continue the current experience, plus introduce new capabilities. And as you know, with any new system, right, keeping current systems or features is a challenge in itself, plus we have to introduce these new ones. And what we're learning is Epic has these unique frameworks that we're having to adopt with very limited resources. So there's these things called data tiles or native apps that Epic available to us, and there's many constraints with that. So we cannot just have the flexibility of maybe we would if we were just directly tapping to our APIs and make a beautiful user experience when trying to book an appointment with a provider online, for example. And now what we're trying to deal with is, okay, well, today we have this feature called upcoming appointments. Consumers can check their upcoming appointment, they can view those details. However, Epic is like, well, we're going to give you a data tile to embed that feature into your portal. And we're like, okay, cool, this is great. It looks like really there's a lot of useful information for the consumer. We're like, this is fantastic. But we've learned that there's a lot of technical constraints when we're trying to inherit that data tile and just kind of fit it into our user experience. So Leah has done an amazing job collaborating with the developers to understand the constraints from a design perspective. So we don't find ourselves designing this beautiful experience and then we take it back to the devs and we're like, ta-da, what is this? I can't work with this. This is not going to work. What are you guys thinking? And so we're trying to avoid the ta-da moment, if you know what I mean. We're trying to see how we can bridge with the developer sooner than later, so we don't get to the end of the sprint and find ourselves with a design that completely is not going to work. We've wasted time, we've wasted resources, and now we've just pissed everybody off. So we're trying to make sure that we kind of bridge the developer and UXer together, and we're all collaborating on understanding what are the technical constraints, what are the capabilities, where are the flexibilities in ways we can customize this feature to align with our brand as an organization and what our consumers know today, right? So what we found ourselves doing is we're trying to embed our developers more in our agile ceremonies. So we have multiple touch points. We know we're all busy. It's really hard to get every developer on every meeting. So if we get them in one meeting versus another, great. We're trying to maximize our opportunity. So what we're doing is we have our sprint reviews. We also have our UI touch points we do on a weekly or bi-weekly, kind of on a need to know basis, just because of what, depends on what's going on now. And then we also try them through Miro, or kind of tag them in different designs. We're very fluid in Miro, and we're trying to get various touch points and engagement from the devs to get their feedback as Leah is in designs and what we think is going to work. In addition to that, she does an amazing job just kind of reaching out to them and doing so as she has any questions, just to better tackle them, because we are working against a very aggressive timeline, and we're trying to go live with our first wave in October. So we don't have much time to waste, if you can imagine. So we have to be very efficient, very careful and wise on how we spend our time with these developers, and making sure we think about everything. So that's kind of something super unique, and I feel very blessed to be able to be a product owner with this organization to tackle something this big. Like I said, I think it's very unique to be integrating with a completely new EMR system and then trying to figure out how we bring this into our current experience, plus introduce new features. So that collaboration between the dev and designer is huge. Because as you all know, Advent Health is a brand, and we need to continue to maintain that brand and ensure that our consumers continue to come back and see us and have that amazing experience that we're known for.
For sure. Thanks, Nadine. Yeah, trying to customize and embed third-party tools can be pretty challenging. I know that I've had some experience doing that with Mike. And Mike, maybe you have an experience that you could share where you've had successes or failures where, or you've seen it, where maybe development wasn't involved, or maybe development was involved with UX. It would be great to hear an example. Mike, your mic is very quiet, so maybe we'll. It's a little better. Sorry, we can't hear you. Maybe while Mike is troubleshooting, Justin, maybe you have an example that you can think of?
Oh, plenty of examples. You know, as Nadine was sharing her thoughts, where my mind went is thinking about the tactics we can all apply to deal with certain situations, and based on how much contact we may or may not have and access we may or may not have with the development team for our respective project, right? I feel like over the course of my career, I've had scenarios where I've had zero contact with the team that would ultimately be building the software, minimal contact, and then sufficient contact. In that worst case scenario where you can't collaborate, right? You lean on best practices, you go with your gut from your past experiences to arrive at what should I produce to make this invisible team that I'll never meet optimally successful. And sadly, those scenarios still exist. There are still corporations that ship things to faraway lands and we never meet those people. And we do the best we can in that situation. In a more minimal sense, where we may have some interaction, but it's not quite sufficient, I go back to my roots of gathering requirements. I want to get some time with those consumers of my deliverables to ask, what do you need in order to be successful? So that I make sure out of all the hundreds of things I could produce or my team could produce, what are we going to do to line you up for the greatest chance of success? And then in that sufficient scenario where you actually have collaboration that's happening on a frequent basis, bringing in the developers as often as they're able without hurting them or hurting their other responsibilities is the ideal situation. You know, I'd say back when I did a lot of federal government work, we were doing a lot of design and throwing it over a fence to a team we never met. Those were the rules back during, gosh, that would have been the Bush II administration. So long time ago. I'm old. So those were the rules back then. And now things are a lot more collaborative. They're actually bringing in developers to the table, even in the federal space. So, you know, things are changing, things are improving, but I think it goes back to us as experts in communication and connecting stakeholders, leaning on our experiences and what's going to set our consumers up for success.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Justin. You know, it makes me think a little bit about how whenever you're trying to build those teams out and you're building those relationships with who you're going to be working with, sometimes you get the vibe, right? Like I talk about how long I work with Mike, and you know when you ask him something, whether he says, this is going to work, that isn't going to work. But also sometimes you get that pushback. And Jeremy, being a full development group, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. As a UX designer, I might ask for the impossible. I might ask for the possible that might be challenging, but then you hear it's impossible. How do you know where that line draws and when you should push or when you shouldn't as a UXer to a developer?
Yeah, I think it's a healthy tension, and that's kind of going to be the answer for anything related to collaboration, right? I mean, we're in it together. I think the first and most important thing is understanding that you're not out to get me and I'm not out to get you. A lot of the times, adversarial relationships exist between matrixed organizations because the folks that run those organizations don't go out of their way to prevent that from occurring. Developers are opinionated folk, just like UX are opinionated folk. And people get offended when we start sort of trampling around in each other's gardens, so to speak. So I like to think of it this way: let's build the garden together. You can sow some things over there, and I'll do my stuff over here, and let's kind of live. Let's cohabitate as a team, so that we can really kind of dial in on each other's personalities and understand the psychology of a team, which to me is extraordinarily important. It's not just about the technical ideas that we're talking about. It's about the psychology and the relationship that you and I have as human beings. And so I never thought you'd hear a developer say that, right? It's like, no, I'm the guy that like wants to sit here and write code and don't ever talk to me. Now, as far as in most cases, an engineer does not want to tell you no. I don't want to tell you it's impossible. I want to tell you it's possible, and here's how. Because we are born problem solvers, just like UX folks are born to a different set of problems that you're solving, and you know that's what you're doing, and you were born to solve those problems. As a software engineer and as a product engineer, I am born to solve your problems. So oftentimes, I only say no when I get a crazy weirdo thing like the augmented reality example, where it's like, no. And then, we sit across from one another and we argue for a minute, and then you finally realize no. But for the most part, I've never met an interaction design that I've not been able to fulfill, except for timing. If you ask me and my team to burn 80-hour weeks to get your design out the door, the answer is no. I'm not going to do that. You can scale your design back, or we can work less, or we can spread the time out, right? As opposed to anytime it starts to damage my team or it starts to cause problems with folks living, full lives, that's where I begin to push back. But in general, I've never met a technical problem I've not been able to solve in some shape or fashion.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Does anyone want to add anything to that? That's great. Nadine, I'll ask you the next question. I know that you've had a few different designers on your teams in the time that we've worked together. How have you seen that relationship of dev and UX get started and be successful as they begin to work together?
So I've had some interesting challenges because we've had a lot of resources come on and off the team due to just some rehiring and structure changes. And working with contractors on and off and full-time employees, you also get a different change and feel of, their dedication to the work or project at times. But luckily now my team is fully stocked with an amazing group of contractors. I feel like they're part of the organization, and historically getting them involved with other UX UI designers, I felt like a lot of them did not actually care for the agile ceremonies or processes. So I had to get creative in how do I get them engaged and get their feedback, but not have to be so stuck on process. Because sometimes process gets in the way of getting the work done. And as much as I love the Agile framework, I've experienced that too. And so I've tried to get creative with them. They're like, oh, another meeting. Do I really need to join this meeting? And so we have to kind of meet in the middle, right? And so I really felt like, okay, well, if you're not going to be able to participate in these meetings, or you feel like you have too many meetings going on, let's figure out a different way that works and building that relationship. So what we found was just tagging them in the Miro boards or in the Figmas or whatever it was in Jira and getting those conversations going. Some people preferred that interaction online versus getting on a call. And so we'd slowly just build that relationship. And then through time, we felt like, okay, well, conversation was definitely needed to further deep dive into that. And they were more willing to do that because at that point they're bought in and they're now engaged and they want to participate. So we kind of slowly get them introduced into these meetings, but we'll kind of start out their way, and I'm flexible to make it work. However, we just get their input and engagement. It doesn't matter to me. I'm less of a process focused person, more on whatever works and let's get it done. And so that's been kind of my approach. And obviously, trying to be on those meetings to help facilitate and engage the developer and UX UI helps too, right? It kind of helps get the conversations flowing as well. So I found that we use Microsoft Teams, tagging in Miro, Jira, you name it. We were using Envision at one point. however I can get them involved, just giving that feedback. That kind of worked for me for those guys who didn't care for meetings.
Awesome, thank you. It looks like we lost Mike, so it's the three of you all now. And Justin, how have you seen that work successfully?
Process can get in the way. I definitely agree. I think that as you start a new initiative, a new product that you're bringing to life, collaborating with the team early to understand how people prefer to work, what are their preferences, how do they like to be communicated with, are they more Slack people, phone call people, email people? All of those things are formalities that are good to understand as early as possible, because it's going to help you collaborate and get on the same page as quickly as possible. I mean, I have to imagine so many of us feel like a lot of times 20% of our job is UX and 80% is cat herding, stakeholder alignment, gaining consensus, poll worker, whatever you have to do to keep things in motion and keep things moving. So I think as early as you can bring your business stakeholders and your more technical resources together and collaborate on how to collaborate, the better.
Yeah, I agree. And to add to that, Justin, I think you make a valid point. And there's times where, we're in the midst of a sprint and we're needing their engagement. And sometimes it's just easier to just shoot somebody a message and get that immediate response and keep going. I find that sometimes having a meeting just to get everybody on the same page and setting it up takes more time than just kind of getting to it. And so that engagement can happen in multiple forums. Now that we're all mostly going remote too, we kind of have to get a little bit more creative anyway. So it's kind of forced us to think a little differently about how we get that engagement. And I think you're absolutely right. I always ask my UX UI designers, how do you prefer to work? Do you want to just tag, Teams, get on a call, however we got to do it? Let's make it happen. Because at the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve the same goal.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you said that. We're all trying to achieve the same goal. That goes back to what Jeremy was saying earlier. Development team may push back on certain things, but ultimately everyone in the ecosystem, right, wants this project to be successful. So if they're pushing back, it's not because, for the most part, it's probably not because they're just lazy or stubborn or dismissive. They just know the constraints that they're working within and are ready to riff on ideas of alternatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully, if you have a healthy team, if you have an unhealthy team, we might be a little bit angry. So it depends.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I do want to be considerate of our time. We have about 15 minutes left. So Nadine, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Justin and Jeremy and see if there are any last minute thoughts about anything that Jeremy covered or about just this relationship between UX and development and working together. Love you.
Actually, I did want to touch on it was early on, Jeremy, you mentioned about building something that nobody cared about. And I feel that happens more often than we realize. And I honestly think that's something we could easily avoid thanks to our UX and research team. It's super important to get those data insights early on. And I'm very appreciative for, I don't know if they've met Thomas West, but we have Thomas on our team and Leah who really get on and go get things tested early on to get feedback from consumers, what works for them, testing the older demographics. We know that our audience is mostly, the folks that need care and are going to their providers more frequently. And what works for them through these experiences, what does it? Do they care to see different colors to differentiate different experiences? Does this icon even make sense to them? Can they even read this text in the mobile experience? I don't know, right? So these are all things we need to find and do some research and get some data insights to report back. And just recently, we had this around a recent project around iconography. We've been struggling on trying to streamline an iconography library and use icons that make sense to consumers, complex concepts, simplifying it by an icon, and then making sure that we haven't used it somewhere else. Advent Health is huge and we show icons all over the place. So we've had to do a ton of, auditing, user testing to identify what makes sense to the consumer. And we've learned a lot through that. And we've been able to take that back to our stakeholders and say, guys, what you initially loved as an icon is not going to work. And here's all the reasons why. And this is why consumers are going to come to our product, because it makes sense to them. If we were going to use these icons before, it might have confused them. It might have decreased our utilization in the portal. Who knows what it could have happened. So I feel data insights is super important with the UX team to start that early on and better express where your product is going and the success of your product. And hopefully you avoid those wasted time and efforts and money of building a product that no one's going back and using. So I thought that was a really great touch point. So you want to build what matters.
For sure. Thank you for that. And it's funny because one of the questions I was going to ask about was having the developers be involved with research. We didn't have time to really go through that, but it's just something that I know the sooner we can put some of those findings in front of development, letting them be a part of that process. I've seen where we can have successes with that. I know other people in the group have seen that too. I'd love to know more about like how you get a developer to go, yes, that is time well spent, because not all developers do feel like that is part of the gig, but really the value they get once they start doing it, it's like crack, right? They want more, and it's amazing. But Justin, I'll let you kind of move into the next phase here, and then we'll hand it over to Jeremy.
Sure. I think a lot of what we've talked about this evening ties back to what is the problem that we're solving and how well defined is that problem. So Jeremy shared the idea that the moving company had about an augmented reality quoting tool. What's the problem behind that? Are they saying that the estimates are frequently inaccurate? Are the estimates, are they taking too long to complete? I love to understand the why behind what I'm being asked to design. And I know that practically all of my teammates feel the same way. And the same sort of conversation can take place across all of our different respective roles on a project. Everyone wants to understand the problem we're solving. And I think that helps frame how we're going to work together. The engineers can begin thinking about that as well and say, well, we've solved a lot of problems in our days. This doesn't sound that different from what we did over here. Lean on each other's experiences, bring that knowledge to the table. Don't just, let it sit on a shelf and ask them to, design in a vacuum or build in a vacuum. Rather, bring all of that knowledge together as much as you can and collaborate as often as you can, especially once you have that shared understanding of what problem you're solving. That's a big deal. I think we in the UX space are in a unique position in a very comfortable position to push back to our business side stakeholders to get that detail. Tell me more about what got you to this point. Who are we serving? What are their motivations? Why are we working on this now? Why didn't we work on this 5 years ago? Those are questions that we are empowered to ask and add a lot of value for everyone involved.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. And Jeremy, we'll let you conclude here, and then I'll do some of the wrap up.
Cool. I have two quick things. One is, I bet you all didn't know that I'm a closet UXer. My undergraduate was in human-computer interaction with Melody Jackson Moore. We built brain-computer interfaces for paraplegics during my research days. And one of the things that I learned from that entire curriculum was select the right tool for the right job from a user interaction design perspective, right? So Don Norman's The Design of Everyday Things is one of my favorite books. If you go give it a read, it talks about all of the fun UB comp ideas that random people came up with over the years and why they've failed. We didn't have iPads until recently, but the idea has been around since the 70s. It's all about meeting the consumer where they are at the right time in the right place. And that's how you're solving those problems. Similarly, the software engineer in me has the exact same itch that has to be scratched. In that, I'm solving problems in the deeper technical level. I'm writing code for the people that come after me. I'm focusing on the quality of the implementation. I'm selecting the right tool for the right job. But there's one common undercurrent that occurs both inside the software engineering world and inside the UX world. And that is the thing that developers hate the most, and that is human relationships, right? And I kid, we actually do like to have conversations with other people. It's extraordinarily important to think about the psychology of your teams and how everyone comes together and have conversations with one another, being able to spark that, being able to drive that, noticing people that react very well to one another, going back to your question, Wes, or your statement earlier. How do I get a developer in the room when we're doing research? Find a developer that makes that happen, that they're happy when they do that, right? And that person can then turn around and get excited about what they're doing and then bring it back into the team and say, guys, we have this thing. And most of guys like me are like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. What's like the bottom line? Oh yeah, we're going to do this now. Oh, cool, great. And then, the systems minds can start sort of, creaking and saying, well, really it's important that we look at non-functional requirements, because the problem that user is seeing has nothing to do with a bad interaction design. It's because our API is too slow. So now let's go talk to the director of engineering and get them to tell us or give us time to make our stuff faster, right? These are all things that can only be discovered in the collaboration between our two disciplines. So it's extremely important from my perspective to focus on those relationships, to bring everyone to the table with equal weight and with equal voices, and to listen to one another and not write each other off as the random UX nerds that wear plaid and drink coffee and the guys in the back room that have all their headphones on just writing code. Like we're all here together to solve a problem. We're a fellowship, not a pirate ship. Let's go together to solution the thing that's best for our customers.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. A fellowship, not a pirate ship.
Trademark. That's mine. You can't have it.
Cool. I love it. Let me share my screen again if I can actually remember to hit the share button here in Zoom. And let's move you all over here. I hope everyone can thank Jeremy, Mike, Justin, and Nadine. I really appreciate you all coming out, and I'm sure that everyone here gained a lot from the presentation and everyone's thoughts around this topic. So if you all are interested, take a screen grab, meet up with these folks on LinkedIn, send them a thanks. And I know that we at Do UX really appreciate your time and coming out, spending it with us and talking about this topic. So thank you. I will applaud. Yes, thank you.